Think you know everything about this pioneering hip-hop film? From legendary nightclubs shutting down forever on the final day of filming, to young Chris Rock hiding in crowd scenes, and a Fat Boys song earning a Golden Raspberry nomination, Krush Groove harbors secrets stranger than fiction. Prepare to discover the bizarre behind-the-scenes chaos, accidental career launches, and production mishaps that transformed a simple story about Def Jam Records into one of cinema's most wonderfully weird musical time capsules. Fact 1. Disco Fever's tragic final act. The legendary Disco Fever nightclub became an unwitting casualty of Hollywood when Krush Groove wrapped filming in 1985. This wasn't just any ordinary venue getting caught up in movie production chaos. Disco Fever was the beating heart of early hip-hop culture, located on Jerome Avenue in the South Bronx, where Run DMC had performed their very first show and where countless rap pioneers had cut their teeth performing for packed crowds of music lovers and street culture enthusiasts. When the filmmakers approached club owner Sal Abatiello about using his venue for key scenes in their movie about the rise of Def Jam Records, he jumped at the opportunity with high hopes that the Hollywood spotlight would breathe new life into his struggling establishment. The club had been experiencing difficult times by the mid-'80s, and Abatiello genuinely believed that appearing in a major motion picture would bring much-needed attention back to Disco Fever and help restore its former glory as the premier destination for hip-hop culture in New York City. The production team spent weeks filming at the club, capturing the raw energy and authentic atmosphere that only a real hip-hop venue could provide for their story about Russell Simmons and the early days of rap music. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until the very last day of shooting, when local authorities arrived to conduct inspections related to the film permits and made a shocking discovery that would seal the club's fate forever. During their review of the paperwork, officials realized that Disco Fever had been operating without the required cabaret license for years, essentially meaning the club had been functioning illegally since its opening. The community board responsible for approving such permits immediately rejected Abatiello's application, and authorities placed a permanent lock on the front door, ending the legendary venue's 10-year run as hip-hop's most important gathering place. Fact 2. LL Cool J's persistent backdoor audition. LL Cool J's appearance in Krush Groove happened through sheer determination and what might be the most successful case of showing up uninvited in movie history. The 17-year-old rapper wasn't part of the original cast or even scheduled to audition for the film, but he had already released 2 singles through Def Jam Records and was hungry to get his music in front of a wider audience when he learned that a movie was being made about the label where he recorded. Instead of waiting for an official invitation or going through proper Hollywood channels, LL Cool J took matters into his own hands by literally showing up at various filming locations around New York City throughout the production. He would arrive at shooting sites with his boombox in hand and start performing freestyle raps for anyone who would listen, including crew members, other actors, and eventually the producers themselves, who began to notice this persistent young artist who kept appearing wherever they were filming. Russell Simmons later reflected on LL Cool J's unusual approach during interviews celebrating the film's 25th anniversary, explaining how the teenager's relentless determination and undeniable talent eventually wore down the production team. Rather than having security remove him from the sets, the filmmakers decided to create a small role specifically for LL Cool J that would showcase his signature song, "I Can't Live Without My Radio," in what became the movie's most memorable musical moment. The scene shows LL Cool J arriving at an audition where he's told that tryouts are over for the day, but he demands that his friend turn on the boombox anyway and launches into an electrifying performance that captivates everyone watching. This impromptu audition sequence served as LL Cool J's first music video since he hadn't made any official videos for his previous singles, and the exposure from appearing in a major motion picture helped launch his career into the stratosphere when his debut album Radio was released just weeks after the movie hit theaters. Fact 3. Only 1.0 CDs ever existed. The Krush Groove soundtrack became one of the rarest hip-hop albums in existence due to Warner Brothers Records making an incredibly limited decision about compact disc production in 1985. While the soundtrack was widely available on vinyl records and cassette tapes when it was released alongside the movie, the record label chose to press only 1,000 copies on the then-new compact disc format, creating what would become an unintentionally exclusive collector's item decades later. This extremely small CD pressing happened during the early days of compact disc technology, when many record companies were still uncertain about consumer demand for the new digital format and often produced much smaller quantities compared to traditional vinyl and cassette releases. Warner Brothers likely viewed the CD version as a test market experiment rather than a serious commercial venture, especially since compact disc players were still expensive luxury items that most music fans didn't own in the mid-80s. The soundtrack itself featured an impressive collection of tracks from the movie, including songs by Run DMC, LL Cool J, Sheila E., The Fat Boys, Curtis Blow, and New Edition, along with the title track, Can't Stop the Street, performed by Chaka Khan. The album performed respectably on the charts, reaching number 79 on the pop chart and number 14 on the R&B chart, which made the tiny CD production run seem even more puzzling in retrospect. Today, finding an original 1985 pressing of the Krush Groove soundtrack on compact disc is like discovering buried treasure for music collectors and hip-hop historians. The combination of the album's historical significance as one of the first major hip-hop movie soundtracks and the incredibly small number of CDs that were manufactured has made these rare discs worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars when they occasionally appear at record shows, online auctions, or estate sales. Fact 4. Fat Boys' Golden Raspberry Shame. The Fat Boys achieved a peculiar place in entertainment history when their song All You Can Eat from Krush Groove was nominated for a Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Original Song in 1986, making it one of the very few hip-hop tracks ever to receive this infamous recognition for cinematic failure. The Golden Raspberry Awards, also known as the Razzies, were created to spotlight the worst achievements in film each year, serving as a humorous counterpoint to the Academy Awards by celebrating movies, performances, and songs that critics and audiences considered particularly terrible. The nomination came as a shock to many people because All You Can Eat was actually one of the most memorable and entertaining sequences in the entire movie, featuring the charismatic trio of Prince Marky D, Cool Rock Ski, and the Human Beatbox, performing an energetic rap about devouring everything in sight at a Times Square Sparrow restaurant. The scene showed the Fat Boys filling their trays with massive amounts of food while rapping about their love of eating, creating a fun and lighthearted moment that perfectly captured their playful personalities and appealed to audiences who enjoyed their humorous approach to hip-hop music. What made this Razzie nomination particularly strange was that the song was produced by respected hip-hop pioneer Curtis Blow, who had specifically written it to fit the movie's storyline about the Fat Boys finding comfort in food after losing a talent competition. The track featured clever wordplay, catchy beats, and showcased the group's signature style of combining rap with comedy in a way that felt authentic to their established musical identity. The Razzie voters apparently viewed the song as too silly or lightweight for serious consideration, which reflected the broader cultural attitudes toward hip-hop music in the mid-80s, when many mainstream critics still didn't understand or appreciate rap as a legitimate art form worthy of respect alongside traditional movie soundtrack song. Fact 5. Chris Rock's hidden cameo. Long before Chris Rock became one of America's most recognizable comedians and actors, he made a completely uncredited appearance in Krush Groove as an unknown 20-year-old trying to break into show business in New York City. During one of the movie's club scenes where a fight breaks out among the crowd, Rock can be spotted standing next to a telephone, essentially serving as a background extra without any speaking lines or significant screen time that would hint at his future stardom in comedy and entertainment. At the time of filming in 1985, Rock was just another aspiring performer working small gigs around New York and picking up whatever work he could find to pay the bills while developing his stand-up comedy routine at local clubs and open mic nights throughout the city. He was completely unknown to audiences and hadn't yet landed any major comedy club residencies, television appearances, or other opportunities that would eventually launch him toward becoming a household name in American entertainment. The fight scene where Rock appears takes place during one of the movie's climactic moments when tensions boil over at the nightclub, and while the main action focuses on the primary characters and their conflicts, careful viewers can catch glimpses of Rock among the crowd of people reacting to the chaos unfolding around them. His appearance was so brief and unremarkable that he didn't even receive credit in the movie's closing titles, making this one of those fascinating pieces of entertainment trivia that only became interesting years later when Rock achieved massive success. Rock would go on to become a star of Saturday Night Live just 5 years later in 1990. followed by successful comedy specials, major movie roles, and his own television shows, making his tiny uncredited role in Krush Groove an amusing footnote in the career of someone who would eventually become one of the most influential comedic voices of his generation. Fact 6. Ethnic tensions required megaphone intervention. The filming of Krush Groove was temporarily brought to a standstill when heated arguments broke out among the background extras about who could rightfully claim credit for creating hip-hop culture, leading to physical confrontations that required direct intervention from the movie's co-producer Russell Simmons himself. The disputes centered around conflicting viewpoints between Latino extras, who argued that hip-hop was a collaborative creation between Black and Latino communities in the Bronx, and Black extras who insisted that Latino influence came later in the movement's development after the foundational elements had already been established. These weren't just casual disagreements or minor tensions simmering in the background, but actual fights that erupted on set between people who felt passionately about protecting their community's role in hip-hop history during a time when the culture was still relatively new and its origins were being documented and discussed for mainstream audiences. The arguments became so intense and disruptive that normal filming couldn't continue, with crew members and other cast members watching, as what should have been a celebration of hip-hop culture turned into a battleground over cultural ownership and historical accuracy. Russell Simmons, who was not only co-producing the film but also serving as one of hip-hop's most prominent figures and businessmen, realized that he needed to step in personally to restore order and get the production back on track. He grabbed a megaphone and addressed the entire crowd of extras with a message aimed at ending the conflict and refocusing everyone's attention on their shared goal of making a movie that would showcase hip-hop to the world. According to witnesses on set, Simmons shouted through the megaphone that hip-hop was Black invented, but now everyone was rocking to it, so they should stop fighting and finish making the movie together. His intervention successfully calmed the situation and allowed filming to resume without further incidents. Fact 7. Sheila E. only got cast for romance. Sheila E.'s inclusion in Krush Groove had nothing to do with her actual connection to Def Jam Records or the real-life story of Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin, but instead came about purely because the filmmakers felt they needed a romantic subplot to make the movie more appealing to mainstream audiences. The producers and screenwriters believed that a film focused entirely on the business side of starting a hip-hop record label wouldn't have enough dramatic appeal for general moviegoers, so they decided to create a love triangle between the Russell Simmons character, his brother Run, and a female musician who could serve as both a romantic interest and a musical performer. When it came time to cast this fictional love interest role, the production team didn't look for the most talented actress or even someone with the strongest connection to the hip-hop community, but rather focused on finding a musician who was already signed to Warner Bros. Records, which happened to be the sister company of Warner Bros. Pictures, the studio distributing the film. This corporate synergy made perfect business sense from a Hollywood perspective, as it allowed the movie to feature music from an artist who was already part of the Warner Bros. Family, potentially creating cross-promotional opportunities between the film and the soundtrack album. Sheila E. fit this requirement perfectly since she had recently signed with Warner Bros. Records and was riding high on the success of her hit songs The Glamorous Life and A Love Bizarre, which she had recorded in collaboration with Prince. Her star power and musical credibility made her an attractive choice for the role. Even though she had no real-world connection to Russell Simmons, Def Jam Records, or the actual events that inspired the movie's storyline. In the film, Sheila E. plays herself as a drummer and percussionist who becomes romantically involved with the Russell Walker character while also developing a professional relationship with Krush Groove Records. Fact 8. Blair Underwood's unscripted kiss. Blair Underwood's first on-screen kiss with Sheila E. wasn't written in the original script, but was added by director Michael Schultz on the spot to solve a continuity problem that had emerged during the filming process. The issue arose because the movie was being shot out of sequence, which is common in film production for scheduling and location reasons, but sometimes creates challenges when scenes need to flow naturally together in the final edited version of the movie. During an interview years later reflecting on his film debut, Underwood explained that he and Sheila E. had already filmed an intimate love scene that takes place later in the movie's storyline, where their characters, Russell Walker and Sheila E., have developed a romantic relationship and spend the night together. However, when it came time to shoot an earlier scene where the characters meet in a hallway after Russell gets off an elevator, director Michael Schultz realized there was a problem with how their interaction would appear to audiences watching the finished film. Since viewers would see the love scene after watching the hallway encounter, Schultz felt that the characters needed to greet each other in a way that acknowledged their intimate relationship rather than acting like casual acquaintances or new romantic interests. The director made the decision during filming to have Russell and Sheila kiss when they meet in the hallway, even though this moment of physical affection wasn't included in Ralph Farquhar's original screenplay. Underwood remembered this as a particularly memorable moment from his first movie experience, especially since he was a young actor making his feature film debut and suddenly found himself kissing one of the most popular recording artists of the 1980s. The spontaneous addition of this romantic moment helped create better narrative flow between the scenes and made the relationship between the two main characters feel more authentic and believable to audiences. Fact 9. Fat Boy's name change myth. One of the most memorable scenes in Krush Groove shows the trio originally known as the Disco Three, discovering their new identity as the Fat Boys after gorging themselves at a Sparrow restaurant buffet and realizing they should embrace what made them different. But this heartwarming origin story was completely made up for the movie and bears no resemblance to how the group actually got their famous name. In the film, Prince Marky D, Cool Rock Ski, and the Human Beatbox are shown drowning their sorrows in an all-you-can-eat buffet after losing a talent competition, and during their feeding frenzy, they have an epiphany that they should stop trying to be something they're not, and instead celebrate their size by calling themselves the Fat Boys. The real story behind their name change was far more practical and business-oriented, involving their manager Charles Stettler and a shocking hotel bill that arrived during one of their early tours in Europe. While the group was performing overseas and building their international fan base, Stettler received a bill from their hotel that included a breakfast charge of $350, which was an enormous amount of money for a morning meal in the 1980s and represented a significant portion of their tour budget. When Stettler saw this astronomical breakfast bill, he immediately realized that the three young men had ordered massive amounts of food for their morning meal, far exceeding what any normal hotel guests would consume during a typical breakfast service. Rather than getting angry about the unexpected expense, Stettler had a moment of inspiration and suggested that the group should change their name from the Disco Three to the Fat Boys, reasoning that their appetites were clearly becoming part of their identity and could be turned into a marketing advantage. The group agreed to the name change, and it proved to be a brilliant business decision that helped establish their unique brand in the hip-hop world as the fun-loving, food-obsessed trio who brought humor and personality to rap music. Fact 10. Prince's hidden vocals. Prince's involvement in A Love Bizarre went far beyond simply co-writing the song with Sheila E., as he secretly performed almost every single musical element heard in the track, while deliberately keeping his contributions largely hidden from public view. While Sheila E. received primary credit as the lead vocalist, and the song appeared on her 1985 album Romance 1600. Prince was actually responsible for playing all the instruments on the recording except Eddie Minenfield's saxophone parts, creating the entire musical foundation that made the song such a compelling and danceable hit. Prince's fingerprints were all over the production, from the distinctive Lin LM1 drum machine with flanger effects that drives the rhythm throughout the 12-minute album version, to the round, popping synth bass line that gives the song its funky groove, to the West Montgomery-style guitar solo that plays during the song's extended fade-out. He also provided all the backing vocals that can be heard supporting Sheila E.'s lead singing, essentially turning what sounds like a duet between two artists into a carefully orchestrated performance where Prince was singing harmony with himself in the background. This pattern of extensive but uncredited involvement was typical of Prince's approach to his protégé projects during the mid-80s, when he was simultaneously working on his own career while developing and producing music for artists like Sheila E., Vanity 6, and The Time. Prince often preferred to let his collaborators receive the spotlight and public recognition while he worked behind the scenes as a creative force, sometimes using pseudonyms or simply avoiding detailed credits altogether. The only official writing credit that Prince received for A Love Bizarre appeared on the album, making it the only song on Romance 1600 that acknowledged his participation, even though he had likely contributed to other tracks on the record as well, through his role as Sheila E.'s mentor and creative partner. Fact 11. Crew member visible in Sparrow scene. One of the most glaring production mistakes in Krush Groove can be spotted during the Fat Boys' iconic all-you-can-eat performance at the Times Square Sparrow restaurant, where a film crew member is clearly visible standing guard at the entrance to prevent curious passers-by from wandering into the shot while the cameras were rolling. This behind-the-scenes blooper made it into the final cut of the movie and has been noticed by sharp-eyed viewers for decades, turning what should have been a seamless musical sequence into an unintentional peek behind the curtain of movie-making magic. The Sparrow scene was filmed at the restaurant's newly opened Times Square location, which provided an authentic New York City backdrop for the Fat Boys' humorous tribute to buffet dining, but shooting in such a public and busy location created obvious challenges for the production team. Times Square in 1985 was already a bustling tourist destination filled with people walking by at all hours, and the sight of cameras, lights, and famous rappers performing inside a pizza restaurant would naturally attract attention from curious onlookers who might want to get a closer look at what was happening. To maintain control over the filming environment and ensure that unauthorized people didn't accidentally walk into the scene and ruin takes, the production crew stationed someone at the restaurant's entrance with instructions to politely but firmly keep people from entering during the musical performance. Unfortunately, either the filmmakers forgot to edit around this crew member or simply didn't notice the mistake during post-production, allowing the guard to remain visible in the background throughout parts of the sequence. Viewers who watch the scene carefully can also spot regular pedestrians on the street outside, looking through the windows at the filming taking place inside, adding another layer of real-world intrusion into what was supposed to be a controlled movie environment. Fact 12. LL Cool J's name misspelled before his scene. A major continuity error in Krush Groove reveals that LL Cool J was supposed to be introduced as a completely unknown artist trying to break into the music business, but his name actually appears written on a chalkboard behind Sheila E. during an early club performance scene, long before his dramatic audition sequence where he's supposedly discovering his talent for the first time. This mistake creates a confusing timeline problem because the movie's storyline depends on viewers believing that LL Cool J is a hungry newcomer who nobody has heard of when he shows up uninvited to audition for Krush Groove Records. The error occurs during Sheila E.'s performance of A Love Bazaar at a nightclub, where attentive viewers can spot the name LL Cool J written on a chalkboard that appears to list upcoming performers or artists associated with the venue. The misspelling of his stage name makes the mistake even more noticeable, since his actual name uses cool instead of cool, suggesting that whoever wrote it on the chalkboard either didn't know the correct spelling or was working from incomplete information about the young rapper. This continuity problem becomes particularly glaring when LL Cool J finally makes his appearance later in the movie, bursting into an audition session where the established artists and producers act as though they've never heard of him before, and are amazed by his raw talent and charisma. The scene is meant to capture the excitement of discovering a future star in his earliest days, but the earlier chalkboard reference undermines this narrative by suggesting that LL Cool J was already known enough to be listed as a performer at local venues. The chalkboard remains visible during multiple shots throughout Sheila E.'s performance, meaning that anyone paying close attention to the background details would notice LL Cool J's name appearing in the movie long before his supposedly spontaneous audition scene takes place. Fact 13. Dogma's betting reference. Krush Groove achieved an unexpected form of pop culture immortality when it was referenced in Kevin Smith's 1999 religious comedy Dogma, where the hip-hop film becomes the subject of a casual argument between two fallen angels who are reminiscing about their time spent on Earth observing human culture and entertainment. The reference appears during a scene where the characters Bartleby and Loki, played by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon respectively, are discussing their experiences watching movies and making bets about which films would become successful at the box office. In the scene, Bartleby mocks his companion Loki by bringing up an old $20 wager that Loki had made years earlier, where he confidently predicted that Krush Groove would become a bigger commercial success than Steven Spielberg's massive 1982 blockbuster E.T. the Extraterrestrial. This bet represents the kind of wildly optimistic but ultimately misguided prediction that someone might make about a small hip-hop movie competing against one of the highest-grossing films in cinema history up to that point. The joke works on multiple levels because it highlights how difficult it can be to predict which movies will connect with audiences, while also poking fun at the idea that anyone would seriously believe a modest musical film about the early days of rap music could compete commercially with a family-friendly science fiction spectacle that became a global cultural phenomenon. E.T. earned over $700 million worldwide and became one of the most beloved movies of all time, while Krush Groove, despite its cultural significance in hip-hop history, was a much smaller commercial success. Kevin Smith's decision to include this specific reference demonstrates how Krush Groove had become enough of a cultural touchstone by the late 1990s that audiences would understand the humor in comparing it to one of Hollywood's biggest blockbusters. Fact 14. Rick Rubin's purple underwear exposure. One of the most unexpectedly humorous moments in Krush Groove occurs during a scene where Rick Rubin, playing himself as the co-founder of the record label, accidentally exposes his bright lavender underwear when Russell Walker bursts into his bedroom to wake him up with an urgent business idea about signing Sheila E. to their roster of artists. This unintentionally comedic wardrobe malfunction creates a lighthearted moment that breaks up the serious business discussions and musical performances that dominate most of the movie's running time. The scene takes place when Russell Walker, portrayed by Blair Underwood, becomes excited about the possibility of adding Sheila E. to Krush Groove Records after seeing her perform at a nightclub and recognizing her potential as both a talented musician and a marketable artist who could help expand their label's appeal beyond just hip-hop acts. In his enthusiasm to share this business opportunity with his partner, Russell rushes over to Rick's apartment and wakes him up from sleep to discuss the idea immediately, rather than waiting until normal business hours. When Russell shakes Rick awake, the sudden movement causes Rick's bedsheets to shift in a way that reveals his colorful underwear choice, creating an unexpectedly personal glimpse into the private life of someone who would later become one of the most successful and influential music producers in the industry. The bright lavender color stands out prominently against the darker tones of the bedroom setting, making it impossible for viewers to miss this accidental exposure. This moment adds a touch of physical comedy to a film that focuses primarily on music and drama, while also humanizing Rick Rubin by showing him as a regular person who can be caught off guard in embarrassing situations just like anyone else, rather than presenting him as a polished music industry executive who always maintains perfect composure. Fact 15. False producer credits. Krush Groove perpetuates a significant historical inaccuracy by portraying Rick Rubin as the producer behind Run DMC's early breakthrough albums, when in reality, a different producer named Larry Smith was responsible for creating the distinctive sound that launched the legendary hip-hop group to stardom. The film shows Rick Rubin working closely with Run DMC in the studio, and implies that he was instrumental in developing their musical style from the very beginning of their recording career. But this representation completely erases the actual contributions of Larry Smith, who deserves credit for producing their first two groundbreaking albums. Larry Smith was the producer who worked with Run DMC on their self-titled debut album, released in 1984, and their follow-up album King of Rock from 1985, both of which established the group's revolutionary approach to hip-hop music and helped bring rap into the mainstream for the first time. Smith's production style, which incorporated heavy rock guitar samples and stripped-down beats, became the template for what would later be known as the classic Run DMC sound that influenced countless other hip-hop artists throughout the 80s and beyond. Rick Rubin didn't actually begin working with Run DMC until their third album, Raising Hell, in 1986, which came out after Krush Groove was released in theaters. This album included their massive crossover hit Walk This Way featuring Aerosmith, which Rubin did produce, and which helped cement his reputation as someone who could successfully blend hip-hop with rock music to create commercially successful recordings. The movie's decision to credit Rubin with Run DMC's earlier work may have been motivated by the fact that he was one of the co-founders of Def Jam Records and was actively involved in the film's production, making it convenient to simplify the story by having him represent all of the group's studio collaborations rather than introducing another character.